Imagine waking up on a planet where nothing lives, where the air is so thin you can barely breathe, where the dust is gray and endless and the horizon stretches forever without a single tree, a single blade of grass, a single sign of life. You've been exiled here as punishment for accidentally casting a spell so forbidden that even speaking its name is illegal. You have no food beyond a few energy bars, no water except what you brought, no way home, no hope of rescue. This is where you're supposed to die, slowly and alone, forgotten by the universe. But what if that dead planet held a secret? What if the very magic that got you exiled was exactly what this world had been waiting for? What if, instead of dying, you discovered powers beyond anything your teachers could have imagined? And what if, in your desperate struggle to survive, you accidentally started building something that would eventually become the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever seen? This is the story of how one failed magic student, cast out and abandoned, transformed a lifeless world into a thriving civilization. This is the story of forbidden magic, ancient secrets, and the birth of an empire. And it all started with one terrible mistake in a crowded examination hall. Let's go back to the beginning. Stellarium Academy wasn't just any school. It was the school, the most prestigious magical institution in 7 star systems. Its towers of crystallized mana floated above the planet Arcanum Prime, connected by bridges of solid light that shifted and changed based on the magical currents flowing through them. Students here weren't just learning spells. They were being groomed to become the Empire's elite. Archmages, court wizards, military commanders. The Academy's graduates shaped the fate of entire worlds. Kaelen Frost didn't belong there. At least, that's what everyone told him. He came from a mining colony so remote that most Academy students had never heard of it. Tertanus 5, a gray ball of rock where people spent their lives underground, extracting the rare crystals that powered the Empire's magical technology. His parents were miners. His grandparents were miners. His entire family history was one of digging in the dark, finding crystals, and selling them to the Empire for barely enough to survive. But Kalin had something his family didn't have: raw, magical power. It manifested when he was 7 years old, during a routine shift in the shallow mines where children worked alongside their parents. He'd touched a vein of unrefined stellarium crystal, the same magical mineral the Academy's towers were built from. Most people felt nothing when they touched stellarium. Some felt a tingle. Kalin felt like he'd grabbed a lightning bolt with his bare hands. The crystal exploded. Not violently enough to hurt anyone, but brilliantly enough to light up the entire mine shaft brighter than noon on a summer day. When the light faded, the vein had transformed. The crystals had grown, twisted, merged into new formations that pulsed with colors miners had never seen before. Purple-black energy crackled through them like frozen lightning, and young Kalin stood at the center of it all, unconscious but unharmed, his body glowing with residual magical energy. The mining company called in specialists. The specialists called in mages. The mages called in Academy recruiters. Within 2 weeks, Kalin was on a shuttle heading off-world, leaving his crying mother and stunned father behind, bound for Stellarium Academy with a full scholarship. The youngest student they'd accepted in 50 years. The first student from a mining colony in the Academy's 300-year history. That had been 13 years ago. Now, at age 20, Kalin stood in the examination arena, surrounded by 3,000 spectators, about to demonstrate the skills he should have mastered years ago. He was a 5th-year student, which meant this examination was critical. Pass, and he'd advance to specialized training in his chosen field. Fail, and he'd be relegated to some dead-end administrative position, filing magical permits for the rest of his life. Everyone expected him to fail. They'd been expecting it since his first year, when it became clear that his raw power meant nothing without the control to use it properly. In his mind, Kalin could see the spell formulas perfectly. He understood the theory better than most students. His written examinations were always top marks, But when he tried to actually cast magic, everything went wrong. A simple levitation spell would either do nothing or launch objects into the ceiling hard enough to crack stone. A basic fire spell meant to light a candle would either fizzle out or set his entire desk ablaze. Healing magic was particularly disastrous. He'd put 3 different practice partners in the medical ward before they stopped assigning anyone to work with him. His magic wasn't just unpredictable, it was dangerous. His instructors were divided on what to do with him. Some thought he should be expelled for the safety of other students. Others thought his control would improve with more time and practice. A few, mostly the older masters who specialized in magical theory, thought there was something fundamentally different about Kaelin's magic that the standard teaching methods couldn't address. But none of them knew how to fix the problem. Master Corvinus was the oldest instructor at the academy. He'd been teaching for over 2 centuries, having used advanced life extension magic to push far beyond a normal human lifespan. He taught ancient magical theory, a class most students found incredibly boring. Dry lectures about how magic worked before the academy codified it into the structured system they use today. But Corvinus had taken an interest in Kalin. He'd call him to his office after class, ask him strange questions about what he felt when he tried to cast spells, what he saw in his mind's eye when magic flowed through him. The academy teaches one path, Corvinus had told him during their last meeting. The refined path, the civilized path, spells with precise formulas and predictable results. But that's not the only way magic works. It's not even the oldest way. What you have, Kalin, it's something the academy stopped teaching 300 years ago. We call it primal magic now, though that name doesn't do it justice. It's raw, unstructured, powerful beyond measure, and completely incompatible with how we teach magic today. Kalin hadn't understood what the old master meant. He just wanted to pass his examination, to prove he deserved to be here despite his humble origins, to show everyone that the poor mining boy could succeed among the nobles and elites. The examination format was straightforward. Demonstrate 6 spells of increasing complexity. Each spell had specific requirements, specific measurements of power and control that would be evaluated by the 3 masters on the examination panel. Kalin had chosen combat magic, specifically evocation, because his destructive power was the one thing he had going for him. If he was going to fail, he might as well fail spectacularly. Master Tyrannus, head of the evocation department, called the examination to order. His magically amplified voice echoed through the arena. Candidate Kaelen Frost, you may begin when ready. First demonstration. Force bolt. Target at 30 feet. Minimum impact requirement. 50 pounds of force. Maximum impact allowable. 100 pounds. Deviation outside this range constitutes failure. Kalin took a deep breath, centered himself, reached for his mana, the magical energy that every mage carried within them. The formula for Force Bolt was simple. He'd practiced it 10,000 times. Visualize the energy, shape it into a projectile, add velocity, release toward the target. Easy. Even first-year students could do it. He spoke the incantation, a series of ancient words that helped focus the mind and shape the spell, felt the mana flow from his core, through his arm, into his hand. The bolt formed, crackling with blue energy. He released it. The projectile shot forward, struck the target dead center. The impact sensor beeped. 75 pounds. Perfect. Within parameters. He'd done it. 1 down, 5 to go. The second spell was more complex. Fan of flames. He had to create multiple streams of fire, each exactly the same temperature and intensity, spreading out in a perfect semicircle. Control and precision, the 2 things he was worst at. He began the incantation, felt the fire magic building in his core, pushed it outward, trying to split it into 5 equal streams. The flames appeared, spread out across the designated targets. Then they started to flicker. One stream grew larger while another diminished. He tried to compensate, pushing more power into the weak stream, but that caused the others to destabilize. The entire pattern collapsed. The flames surged inward, toward him, then exploded outward in an uncontrolled blast. He threw up a hasty shield spell, but the feedback still knocked him backwards. He landed hard on the arena sand, the wind knocked out of him. Gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Master Sylvain, the head of disciplinary affairs, made a note on her evaluation crystal. That wasn't a good sign. But Kalin pushed himself up. He'd expected this. 1 success, 1 failure. He still had 4 more attempts, 4 more chances to prove himself. The 3rd spell, 4th spell, 5th spell. Each one a struggle, each one barely controlled. By the time he reached the 6th and final demonstration, he was exhausted, sweating through his examination robes, his hands trembling from the effort of containing his own power. The spectators had gone from mocking whispers to uncomfortable silence. This wasn't entertaining anymore. This was painful to watch. The final spell was called Precision Strike, a bolt of lightning that had to hit 3 separate targets in rapid succession, each strike calibrated to exact specifications. Too weak, it wouldn't register. Too strong, it would damage the target and count as a control failure. This spell was designed to be the ultimate test of a combat mage's ability. Most students spent months practicing it before their examination. Kalin had spent years. Years of practice, years of failure, years of coming so close only to have his magic spiral out of control at the last second. But he had to try. He gathered his mana, more than he'd used for any spell today. Built the lightning formula in his mind, the complex mathematical structure that would shape raw magic into controlled electricity. Began the incantation. The lightning formed around his hands, crackling with barely contained power. Blue-white, energy that made his arms ache with the strain of holding it. He aimed at the first target. Released. The bolt shot forward, struck perfectly. Success. He immediately gathered for the second strike. Aimed. Released. Another perfect hit. 2 down, 1 to go, and then something changed. As he prepared the third and final strike, he felt something different in his mana. Not wrong, but different. The lightning in his hands wasn't just energy anymore. It felt aware, alive, like it was reaching for something, connecting to something beyond the physical world. The color began to shift. Blue to purple to deep violet to something darker. Black. Black. Lightning. A form of magic that shouldn't exist. A theoretical construct from ancient texts, supposedly impossible to create in the real world. The raw, unfiltered essence of destruction magic, before the Academy's founders had refined it into the safe, controlled spells taught today. Stop! Master Sylvain's voice cut through the arena. Cease casting immediately. That's an order, candidate. But Kalin couldn't stop. The black lightning had its own momentum now, its own terrible purpose. It wanted to be released. He tried to pull the mana back into himself, tried to dispel the forming spell, but that only made it worse. The black lightning began spreading up his arms, across his chest, crackling with power that made the air itself scream in protest. The arena's protective wards, magical barriers that had stood for centuries, began to crack. Fracture lines of light appeared in the invisible shields that protected the spectators. Master Tyrannus raised his hands, preparing to force a magical shutdown that would knock Kalin unconscious. Master Sylvain began weaving a containment spell, trying to trap the black lightning before it could spread further. But Master Corvinus just watched. His ancient eyes were wide, but not with fear, with awe. The black lightning erupted. It exploded, from Kalin in all directions, a sphere of impossible energy that expanded at the speed of thought. It struck the arena walls, and instead of being absorbed by the protective enchantments, it shattered them. Ancient wards that had survived wars and disasters simply ceased to exist. The lightning leaped into the stands, causing spectators to scream and flee in panic. It struck the examination platform, sending all 3 masters diving for cover. But here was the strange thing. Despite its terrifying appearance and overwhelming power, the black lightning didn't actually hurt anyone. Every person it touched felt a shock, a moment of disorientation, but no injuries. What it did affect was magical items. Everywhere the black lightning touched, enchantments failed. Magical artifacts powered down. Spell matrices dissolved. Protective amulets went dark. Even the light crystals that illuminated the arena flickered and died. In the span of 3 seconds, Kalin had dispelled more magic than the most powerful archmages could manage in an hour, and he'd done it completely by accident. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The black lightning dissipated. Kalin collapsed to his knees, completely drained, staring at the chaos he'd caused. The arena was in shambles. Thousands of gold worth of enchantments destroyed. Historical wards that couldn't be easily replaced, gone. And in the center of it all, a terrified young man who had no idea what he'd just done. Master Sylvain recovered, first. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady, professional, cold. Kaelen Frost, you are hereby suspended from all magical activities pending a full investigation into this incident. You will surrender your academy wand and return to your quarters immediately. Do not attempt to cast any magic. Do not attempt to leave campus. A formal tribunal will be convened within 72 hours to determine your fate. Master Corvinus tried to intervene. That wasn't a spell malfunction. That was something else entirely. Something we need to study, not punish. Study? Sylvain turned on him. He just cast a forbidden spell in front of 3,000 witnesses. The Black Lightning hasn't been seen in this academy since the Purge Wars 300 years ago. There's a reason it's been banned. It's unpredictable, uncontrollable, and fundamentally dangerous. The laws are clear. Any use of forbidden magic, intentional or not, carries a mandatory sentence of exile. It was an accident, Kalin managed to say, his voice hoarse. I was just trying to complete the examination. I didn't know this would happen. I didn't even know what Black Lightning was until 3 months ago, when I read about it in the historical archives. Sylvain looked down at him. Her expression wasn't cruel, just implacable. Intent is irrelevant under Academy law. The fact remains that you accessed and utilized a form of magic that was banned by imperial decree over 3 centuries ago. The penalty for that is clearly defined. I'm sorry, Candidate Frost, but the law leaves no room for exceptions. And just like that, Kalen's fate was sealed. The tribunal took place 3 days later in the Grand Council chamber, a circular room at the heart of the Academy's central tower. The walls were lined with portraits of famous graduates, magical paintings that moved and whispered among themselves. The ceiling was enchanted to show a real-time view of the stars, making it feel like the chamber floated in space itself. 12 masters sat in a semicircle, the most senior instructors at the academy, with the headmaster presiding from an elevated seat at the center. Kalin stood alone in the middle of the chamber. No lawyer, no advocate. Academy law didn't allow for defense counsel in disciplinary matters. He could speak on his own behalf, but what could he say? Everyone had seen what happened. The magical recordings from the arena had been reviewed dozens of times. The evidence was incontrovertible. He'd cast Black Lightning, a forbidden spell, in front of thousands of witnesses. The headmaster, an ancient woman whose name was simply Magistra, spoke first. Her voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Candidate Kaelen Frost, you stand accused of casting forbidden magic, specifically the primal destruction technique known as Black Lightning. How do you respond to this charge? Guilty, Kalin said. There was no point in denying it. But it wasn't intentional. I was attempting to cast Precision Strike, a standard evocation spell. The Black Lightning manifested spontaneously. I didn't have the knowledge or ability to create it deliberately. One of the masters, a severe-looking man named Arcturus, leaned forward. You claim ignorance, yet our records show you accessed restricted historical texts 3 months ago. texts that contained descriptions of black lightning and other forbidden techniques. Why were you researching prohibited magic if not to learn how to cast it? I was researching the history of evocation magic, Kalin explained, trying to understand why my combat spells were so unstable. Master Corvinus suggested, I look at historical texts, at how magic was practiced before the modern formulas were developed. The descriptions of black lightning were in those texts, but they were theoretical. The books explicitly stated that black lightning was impossible to create using modern magical practice. And yet you created it, Arcturus said coldly. I didn't. Created intentionally. It emerged on its own when I was trying to complete my examination. Master Corvinus stood. If I may address the tribunal. What Candidate Frost says is consistent with my own observations. His magical pattern is fundamentally different from what we teach. He's what the ancient texts would call a primal, someone whose magic doesn't flow through the refined channels we've developed, but connects directly to the raw sources of magical power. For someone with that affinity, attempting to force magic into academy structures creates instability. Under extreme pressure, like during an examination, that instability can cause spontaneous manifestation of primal forms. Black lightning is simply unstructured destruction magic, freed from the formulas we use to contain and control it. Another master, Lady Theron, spoke up. Master Corvinus, are you suggesting we excuse the use of forbidden magic because of some inherent magical trait? By that logic, anyone could claim special circumstances to avoid punishment. I'm suggesting that exile for an accidental manifestation is excessive, Corvinus replied. Especially when this presents a unique opportunity to study primal magic. In a living subject, we could learn more from working with Candidate Frost than we could from simply disposing of him. Disposing? Sylvain's voice was sharp. Exile is not execution, Master Corvinus. We send condemned individuals to uninhabited worlds where they can live out their lives without posing a danger to civilized society. They're provided with basics. Survival equipment. What happens after that is their choice. What happens after that is they die, Corvinus snapped. Let's not pretend otherwise. The exile worlds are chosen specifically because they're too hostile to sustain life. Sending Candidate Frost to one of those worlds is a death sentence, and everyone in this chamber knows it. Magistra raised her hand, silencing the debate. The law is clear, Master Corvinus. Forbidden magic carries a mandatory sentence of exile regardless of circumstances. We are not here to debate whether that law is just. We are here to determine if the law applies to this case. And clearly it does. Candidate Frost cast black lightning. That is forbidden magic. Therefore, he must be exiled. She turned her gaze to Kalin. However, we can show some mercy in the implementation. There are multiple exile worlds. Some are more hostile than others. Given your age and the accidental nature of your offense, I'm willing to designate a less severe location for your exile. Nullhaven, in the Outer Rim. It's a dead world, but the atmospheric composition is breathable, and the temperature extremes are survivable with proper equipment. You'll have a better chance there than on most exile destinations. Kaelen felt numb. Nullhaven. He'd heard of it. A gray ball of rock at the edge of explored space, used occasionally for exile because it was too far from trade routes for escaped prisoners to pose any threat. But no one had ever escaped from Nullhaven. No one had ever even survived there for more than a few months. The planet was completely devoid of life, of water, of any resources. You starved to death or died of thirst, whichever came first. Is there anything you wish to say before we pass formal sentence? Magistra asked. Kalin thought about it. Thought about begging for mercy, for a reduced sentence, for another chance. But what would be the point? These people had already made their decision. They weren't here to listen to him. They were here to follow protocol, to maintain the appearance of justice while disposing of a problem. Just one thing, he said quietly. When I die on that dead world, remember that you sent me there, not because I was malicious or dangerous, but because I was different. Because my magic didn't fit your neat categories and perfect formulas. Remember that you chose to destroy potential rather than try to understand it. Magistra's expression didn't change. Sentence is passed. Kaelen Frost is hereby exiled from civilized space for a period of life. He will be transported to Nullhaven within 72 hours. He is permitted to take personal belongings that can be carried in 2 standard bags. No magical items except for basic utility enchantments. No communication devices. The sentence begins immediately. The tribunal ended. Guards escorted Kalin back to his quarters, not roughly, but firmly. He had 3 days to prepare for a life sentence on a dead world. 3 days to say goodbye to everything he'd known. 3 days to come to terms with the fact that at age 20, his life was effectively over. He couldn't contact his family. Exile protocol forbade it, supposedly to prevent emotional manipulation or revenge schemes. He could only pack his belongings and wait. He chose carefully. Clothes suited for temperature extremes. His personal books, including the ancient texts on primal magic that had started this whole mess. A small survival kit the Academy grudgingly provided. A few personal items that reminded him of home, of his parents, of the life he'd had before all this. On his last night at the Academy, Master Corvinus visited. The old master brought a small leather bag. Books, he explained, setting it down. Nothing that will get confiscated. Basic texts on magical theory, historical accounts of primal practices, philosophical writings about the nature of magic itself. Where you're going, you'll have plenty of time to read. Why are you doing this? Kalin asked. Everyone else is acting like I'm some kind of monster. Corvinus sat down heavily in the room's-only chair. Because I think you might be something extraordinary, Kalin. The Academy has spent 300 years refining magic into a science, making it predictable, controllable, safe. But in doing so, we've lost something. We've forgotten that magic was once wild and free, that it could do things our modern spells can't even imagine. He paused. The planet they're sending you to, Nullhaven. Do you know why it's called that? Because nothing lives there? Because magical sensors can't read it properly. Every scan comes back null. No mana signatures, no energy readings, nothing. The Academy uses it for Exile precisely because they think magic doesn't work there. But I've been researching Nullhaven for the past 3 days. I pulled the original survey reports from before it was designated as an Exile world. There were anomalies, strange readings that didn't make sense, energy patterns that defied explanation. His eyes glinted. I think there's something on that planet, Kalin. Something that resonates with primal magic. If I'm right, it might be the only place in the galaxy where someone like you can truly thrive. Or it might just be a dead rock where I'll starve to death in 3 months, Kalin said bitterly. That's possible, Corvinus admitted. But I don't think so. I think the Academy is making a grave mistake sending you there. Not because you'll die, but because you might become something they can't control, something they can't understand. And when that happens, remember who helped you. Remember that not everyone at this Academy wanted to throw you away. The next morning, they loaded him onto a transport ship. No ceremony, no official witnesses, just Kalin, 2 bags of belongings, and an automated pilot that would deliver him to his new home. The ship was small, barely larger than a closet, with a single viewport and a hibernation pod for the 2-month journey. As the ship lifted off from the Academy's landing platform, Kalin watched through the viewport. The beautiful towers of Stellarium, Academy shrank below him, becoming smaller and smaller until they were just glints of light against the planet's surface. Then the ship entered hyperspace, and everything disappeared in a blur of distorted starlight. 2 months to think about his fate. 2 months alone with his thoughts, his books, and the growing certainty that his life as he'd known it was over. But what would replace it? Master Corvinus thought Nullhaven held some kind of opportunity. But what kind of opportunity could a dead world offer? The ship's computer woke him as they approached the destination. Arriving at Nullhaven, Prepare for atmospheric entry and planetary landing. Kalin pressed his face against the viewport, getting his first real look at his new home. What he saw made his heart sink. Nullhaven was exactly as described. Gray, lifeless, dead. No blue oceans, no green continents, no white clouds. Just endless gray rock and gray dust under a pale, sickly sun. It looked like despair made solid. The ship descended through a thin atmosphere, touched down in a flat valley, and unceremoniously dumped his belongings onto the gray dust. A mechanical voice announced, "Exile Kaelen Frost has been delivered to Nullhaven as per Academy sentence. May you find peace in your isolation, the bye." Cargo door closed, the engines roared, and the ship was gone, disappearing into the gray sky, leaving Kalin alone on a dead world with 2 bags and rapidly fading hope. He stood there for a long time, staring at the barren landscape stretching in all directions. This was it. This was where he would die. Not in battle, not in glory, but slowly, miserably, alone on a world that had never supported life and never would. But then he remembered Corvinus's words. The old master thought there was something here, something that resonated with primal magic. Kalin reached for his mana, expecting to feel nothing, expecting the nullification effect the planet was supposedly known for. Instead, he felt everything. His mana didn't just respond. It exploded outward, connecting with something vast and ancient beneath the surface of this dead world, something that had been waiting for someone like him. The entire planet resonated with his magic, amplifying it 1,000-fold, transforming it into something new and terrifying and beautiful, and in that moment, Kaelen Frost stopped being a failed student. He stopped being an exile. He became something else, something the galaxy had never seen before. A primal mage on a primal world, with access to power beyond anything the Academy could have prepared him for. The Empire of Nullhaven was about to be born, and the Academy that had cast him out was going to learn a very important lesson. You don't exile your problems, you create them. The first year on Nullhaven was about pure survival. Kalin had to learn to work with the planet's primal magic to meet his basic needs. Water came from underground ice deposits he could sense and extract using earth-shaping magic. Food required, creating edible plants from scratch, using the remnant organic compounds in the planet's dust as seeds for new life. Shelter meant expanding his initial cave into a proper underground complex, carved from solid rock, using magic that would have been impossible at the Academy. But survival was just the beginning. As Kalin grew more comfortable with primal magic, he started to understand what was possible here. The planet wasn't just dead rock. It was a canvas. A blank slate waiting for someone with the vision and power to paint something new upon it. He created the Formed during his 4th month. They were beings of animate dust, held together by magical patterns that drew on the planet's own resonance. At first, they were simple constructs, barely intelligent, capable only of following direct commands. But as he refined the technique, as he learned to imbue them with more complex patterns, they evolved. They developed personalities, preferences, the ability to learn and adapt. They became people, in their own way. By his first anniversary on Nullhaven, Kalin had a community. 50 formed who helped him with construction, resource gathering, and the endless experiments to bring more life to the planet. He'd created dozens of plant varieties, each one adapted to different conditions, slowly spreading across the valley where he'd established his settlement. He'd built a tower, a proper structure that reached toward the gray sky like a declaration of defiance. The breakthrough came when he found the source, 50 miles north of his settlement, in a region where the gray stone took on hints of color. He discovered a pool of liquid water saturated with magical energy. It was a source, a place where primal magic entered the physical world from wherever it originated, and it was massive, more powerful than any source on inhabited worlds. Understanding flooded through him. Nullhaven hadn't died naturally. It had been killed. Someone or something had systematically destroyed all life on this planet. Stripped away its atmosphere and poisoned its soil, but they'd been unable to destroy the source. It was too fundamental, too deeply connected to reality itself. The source had endured, keeping the planet's magical potential alive through eons of death. Kalin moved his settlement to the source. He made it the heart of his growing civilization. Around that pool of living magic, he built Primus, a city that grew year by year as more formed joined his community, and as he created new species to fill different roles. The Swifts, bird-like beings that could scout vast distances and pass through solid matter. The Growers, specialized formed that tended the expanding plant fields with almost biological intuition. And later, simple animals created from magical constructs that could serve as livestock. 4 years after his exile, Nullhaven was transformed. The valley around Primus was no longer gray. It bloomed with strange, beautiful plants in colors that didn't exist in nature. The city itself had grown to cover several square miles, a mix of towering spires and elegant low buildings, all carved from the colorful stone near the source. And the population had exploded. Over 2,000 formed, hundreds of swifts, and countless smaller life forms filling ecological niches. But Kalen's biggest achievement wasn't the city or the population, or even the ecosystem he was building. It was knowledge. He'd spent 4 years learning primal magic through direct experience, understanding how it worked at a fundamental level. He'd documented everything in detailed notes, creating a curriculum that would have shocked his academy, professors. Not because it contradicted what they taught, but because it went so much deeper. It explained things they'd taken for granted, revealed possibilities they'd never imagined. When the academy researchers stumbled upon his civilization in his 4th year, Kalin was ready for them. He sent them home with a message. Nullhaven was no longer a dead world or an exile destination. It was an independent nation, small but sovereign, built from nothing through innovation and will. And he was its emperor, not by conquest, but by creation. The Empire sent a diplomatic delegation 6 months later. Master Corvinus led it, and the old master's pride was evident as Kalin showed him around Primus. They walked through growing fields that shouldn't exist, past buildings carved with precision that would have required years using conventional methods, among citizens that had been dust until Kalin gave them form and purpose. "You've exceeded my wildest hopes," Corvinus said. "When I gave you those books, I thought you might survive a few years. Maybe leave some notes for future researchers. I never imagined you'd build an empire." "I never imagined it either," Kalin admitted. "I was just trying not to die at first." The empire came later. The negotiations took weeks, but eventually resulted in a treaty. Nullhaven was recognized as an independent protectorate, neither fully part of the empire, nor completely separate. Kalin could govern as he wished, but agreed not to interfere with imperial interests. In exchange, the empire would establish diplomatic relations and allow trade. More importantly, the treaty allowed students. Nullhaven would accept students who wanted to learn primal magic, who didn't fit into the academy's rigid systems. Kalin would teach them what he'd discovered, what he'd learned through 4 years of desperate experimentation and breakthrough insights. The first students arrived in his 5th year. Just 12 of them, young mages who'd struggled at the academy, for the same reasons Kalin had. He taught them how to sense the planet's resonance, how to partner with magic rather than commanding it, how to create rather than simply manipulate. And they thrived in ways they never could have at the academy. By his 6th year, Kalin felt ready to return to Stellarium Academy, not as an exile begging for mercy, but as an emperor and master of a magical tradition they'd forgotten. He gave a presentation at the Grand Symposium, demonstrating primal magic principles to an audience of thousands. He showed them what was possible when you stopped trying to force magic into rigid formulas and instead worked with its natural patterns. The presentation was a triumph. Skeptics remained, certainly, but many masters and students alike were intrigued. some even excited. The idea that there was more to magic than what the Academy taught, that ancient knowledge could open new possibilities. It resonated with anyone who'd ever felt limited by conventional approaches. But the real impact came later, in private meetings with the Academy's leadership. Kalin negotiated exchanges of knowledge and students. He secured funding for additional research into primal magic. He established Nullhaven as a legitimate center of magical learning, complementary to the Academy rather than competing with it. He even met with Master Sylvain, the disciplinary master who'd pushed for his exile. She apologized, genuinely and without reservation, said she'd been wrong to follow the law without questioning whether it was just. Promised to do better in future situations. Kalin accepted her apology because he understood something she was only beginning to grasp. His exile, as terrible as it had seemed, had given him opportunities he never would have had at the Academy. It had forced him to grow in ways that never would have happened in a structured environment. Returning to Nullhaven after 3 months at the Academy felt like coming home. His citizens celebrated his return with displays of magic and art that made his heart swell with pride. These beings, these people, they'd built this civilization together. Not as his servants or tools, but as true partners in the work of transformation. Standing on his tower that night, looking out over the glowing city and the green valleys beyond, Kalin reflected on his journey. 6 years ago, he'd been a failure, a disappointment, someone who didn't fit and couldn't succeed in the world he'd been born into. His teachers had given up on him. His classmates had mocked him. The Academy had exiled him to die. But they'd been wrong about what failure meant. They'd seen someone who couldn't follow their path and assumed he had no path at all. They'd mistaken difference for deficiency, unconventional power for no power, and in their rush to dispose of him, to protect their neat categories and comfortable assumptions, they'd given him something far more valuable than any Academy education. They'd given him freedom. Freedom to experiment without constraint. Freedom to fail without judgment. Freedom to discover what he could truly become when there were no limitations except those he imposed on himself, and he'd become an emperor. Not through conquest or inheritance, but through creation. Through the patient work of bringing life to a dead world. Through the daily choice to build rather than destroy. To include rather than exclude. To teach rather than punish. The empire of Nullhaven would continue to grow. More cities would rise around the other sources. More species would be created to fill the growing ecosystem. More students would arrive to learn primal magic. And someday, perhaps in decades or centuries, Nullhaven would be fully alive again, a planet reborn through magic and determination, a testament to what was possible when you refused to accept that anything was impossible. Kaelin's story was one of transformation. A failed student became a master. A condemned exile became an emperor. A dead world became a living civilization. And the forbidden magic that got him cast out became the foundation for something beautiful. He'd proven something important, something the Academy needed to remember. There's no such thing as forbidden knowledge. There's only knowledge we haven't learned to use wisely yet, and sometimes the people who seem most dangerous, most unsuited to our systems and structures, are actually the ones who'll push us forward into new possibilities we never imagined. The galaxy had tried to forget Kaelen Frost, but Nullhaven wouldn't. Let them. Every living thing on this planet, every glowing building and green valley and thriving citizen, they were all proof that he existed, that he mattered, that his story deserved to be told. And this was just the beginning. Because Kalin wasn't satisfied with one reborn planet. He had bigger dreams, grander visions. Someday, there would be more worlds like Nullhaven. More places where those who didn't fit elsewhere could find their path. More civilizations built on the principles of primal magic, on partnership rather than domination, on creation rather than control. The exile who became an emperor had learned the most important lesson of all: that power wasn't about forcing others to obey. True power came from building something worth protecting, from creating a community that believed in a shared vision, from transforming impossibility into reality through persistence, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Kaelen Frost, once the Academy's greatest failure, had become its most important success, not despite his exile, but because of it. And his empire would endure, a living testament to the truth that there are always alternatives, always different paths, always possibilities beyond what conventional wisdom accepts.